The most dangerous moment in a warship's operational life is not the moment it enters a contested strait or closes with a hostile coastline. Those moments are expected. The crew is at battle stations. The systems are online. The radar is in full active mode, and the weapons inventory is confirmed loaded. The ship is, in those moments, designed for exactly what is being asked of it. The most dangerous moment is the one between assignments. The port call, the scheduled maintenance window, the 48 hours when the commanding officer has released 60% of the crew to liberty, and the engineering team has opened the forward CIWS mount for a barrel inspection, and the VLS fire control software is running its quarterly diagnostic cycle, and the duty watch is 6 people instead of 60. That is the moment the adversary had been studying for 11 months. The ship is moored at Pier 4 of Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti, in a scheduled 72-hour maintenance visit. It arrived at 1800 the previous day, completed fuel and provisions transfer by midnight, and has been in maintenance configuration since 100. The time is 3:18 a.m. The duty officer is on the bridge. The duty petty officer is making rounds. 4 additional crew members are on watch rotation. The engineering duty officer is in the engine room monitoring the cooling system diagnostic. The tactical action officer is asleep in his stateroom. The combat information center is unmanned. At 3:18 a.m., the Pierside Air Defense Coordination Net, operated by Camp Lemonnier's ground defense element, detects 50 airborne contacts emerging from the Djiboutian coast, bearing 074, range 41 kilometers, speed 195 kilometers per hour, altitude 400 meters. 2 broad formations of approximately 25 platforms each, staggered in depth by 6 kilometers. The Base Defense Coordination Center transmits the warning at 3:19 a.m. The duty officer receives it at 3:19 a.m. and immediately sounds general alarm. In a properly manned warship at sea, a general alarm produces a combat-capable CIC within approximately 90 seconds. Weapons-free authorization requires the TAO to physically reach the CIC and confirm the engagement solution. Battle Stations produces a full crew within 3 to 4 minutes. The ship is not at sea. The ship is moored. 60% of the crew is ashore. Those aboard are in various states of rest, maintenance work, and off-watch sleep. The duty watch of 6 is the initial response. From general alarm at 3:19 a.m., the TAO needed approximately 4 minutes to reach CIC from his stateroom. 4 minutes. At 195 kilometers per hour, the contacts would close from 41 kilometers to 28 kilometers. At 28 kilometers, inside SM2 range, the SM2 cells were not available. The quarterly VLS fire control diagnostic had taken 12 of the 24 SM2 cells offline at 2 a.m. as part of a scheduled maintenance procedure requiring the fire control software to run an isolated test sequence on the port side VLS firing circuits. Completion estimated at 6 a.m. The remaining 12 SM2 cells were available, but required a manual override of the maintenance lockout, a procedure requiring a qualified VLS technician and the engineering duty officer together at the forward weapons control panel. Estimated time, 8 to 12 minutes from initiation. The 8 SM6 cells were unaffected by the VLS diagnostic. The ESSM cells were unaffected. The forward CIWS was in maintenance configuration. The scheduled barrel inspection, begun at 1 a.m., had required removal, cleaning, inspection, and reassembly of the barrel assembly. Reassembly was 60% complete when the alarm sounded. The forward CIWS was not operational. The aft CIWS was fully operational. The 2 mounts were alternated across port visits to ensure at least one was always fully ready. But the contacts were approaching on bearing 074. The aft mount's optimal coverage arc faced aft and to port. Bearing 074 was at the edge of its engagement geometry, requiring near maximum dome rotation from the primary arc and reducing the window available between sequential engagements. The adversary had studied the port schedule. Commercial maritime tracking services logged the ship's arrival and departure times from 3 previous port visits to this facility. The CIWS maintenance rotation, which mount received barrel inspection on which port call, was observable to anyone positioned near the waterfront for 2 or 3 consecutive visits with basic optical equipment. The VLS fire control diagnostic cycle ran quarterly. Its timing was inferable from the specific access hatch activity and maintenance crew configurations visible from the pier on prior visits. They had not needed access to classified operational planning documents. Everything they needed was visible from a position any commercial vessel, any pier worker, any observer with a good pair of binoculars could occupy legally. The intelligence preparation had taken months. The adversary had been watching for months. They had built this engagement around a maintenance window they had predicted with calendar precision. Running count: 3:19 a.m., second 050 contacts, bearing 074, range 41 kilometers, 195 kilometers per hour, altitude 400 meters, SM6 8 available, SM2 12 behind maintenance lockout, 8 to 12 minutes to restore, 12 cells, offline diagnostic, ESSM 32 available, RAM 21, CIWS forward, maintenance not operational, CIWS aft, operational, non-optimal geometry bearing 074, ship moored, cannot maneuver, CIC, unmanned, TAO en route. Crew aboard, approximately 40%. The duty officer made the first weapons call without waiting for the TAO. The ship's standing orders for port defense permitted ESSM and RAM employment under imminent threat conditions if the TAO was not yet available and the threat was confirmed hostile. 50 airborne contacts at 195 kilometers per hour from 41 kilometers at 3:19 a.m., confirmed by the base defense net and appearing on the SPY-6 in standby mode, met the threshold. The duty electronic warfare technician brought the SPY-6 to full active mode in 41 seconds. The radar picture sharpened, 50 contacts resolving into distinct track files. The duty officer authorized ESSM employment at 3:22 a.m., 3 minutes after the alarm, 3 minutes before the TAO would reach CIC. In those 3 minutes, the contacts had closed from 41 kilometers to 31 kilometers. The TAO reached CIC at 3:25 a.m. and took the engagement picture from a ship that had been fighting for 3 minutes without him. The ESSM had already fired 6 times. 3 contacts neutralized. 3 ESSM rounds had missed. The SPY-6 transition from standby to full active had introduced a 22-second period of degraded track quality as the radar's processing pipeline reestablished calibrated data across all contact files. During those 22 seconds, ESSM was firing against positions computed from the last reliable standby mode track update, producing engagement basket offsets of 25 to 40 meters. 3 of the first 6 rounds missed because the radar had not yet fully recovered from standby when they were authorized. The TAO absorbed the engagement picture in 4 seconds. 47 contacts at 26 to 29 kilometers. 3 SM6 recommended for the lead contacts at 26 kilometers. The SM2 maintenance lockout override. The engineering duty officer had been at the forward weapons control panel since 3:21 a.m. Estimated unlock completion, 4 minutes, 4 minutes. Contacts would be at 12 kilometers in 4 minutes. SM2 optimal engagement geometry began at 40 kilometers. By the time 12 SM2 cells unlocked, the contacts would be past optimal range and inside ESSM territory. The SM-2 unlock had started too late. 12 cells that could have changed the outer ring entirely were unavailable for the engagement window where they mattered most. SM-6. 6 cells. Lead contacts 26 kilometers. Fire. ESSM on everything inside 20 kilometers. RAM at 8 kilometers. Aft CIWS automatic. SM-6 cells 1 through 6 launched at 3:25 a.m. 6 interceptors against 6 lead contacts at 25 to 27 kilometers. The booster plumes were visible from the pier, 6 sequential flashes at 3:25 a.m. reflecting off the harbor water, visible to the base security watch and to anyone on the waterfront looking east. 5 intercepts. 1 miss, residual track quality degradation from the standby to active transition had not fully cleared on 1 contact whose position file had not converged. 46 contacts remaining. SM-6 cells 7 and 8. The last 2 SM-6 against 2 more contacts at 22 kilometers. 2 intercepts. SM-6 inventory 0. 44 contacts remaining. The TAO looked at the display for 1.8 seconds after the SM-6 cells went empty. 8 interceptors at $2.1 million each, gone in 90 seconds. The outer ring was expended. He had 32 ESSM, 21 RAM, 1 operational CIWS mount at non-optimal geometry, and a second CIWS mount still finishing its function test. Against 44 contacts at 19 to 23 kilometers, all closing. He had been in CIC for less than 2 minutes. Running count, 3:27 a.m., second 479, SM-6 0. 44 contacts, range 19 to 23 kilometers, closing. SPY-6, fully calibrated, track quality restored. SM-2 unlocked, 2 minutes remaining. ESSM 26 remaining. RAM 21. CIWS aft, tracking. Forward CIWS maintenance. Cost $16.8 million. Time elapsed 8 minutes. The SM-2 maintenance lockout cleared at 3:28 a.m., 7 minutes from initiation. 12 SM-2 cells available. The nearest contacts were at 17 kilometers. SM-2 minimum engagement range was 8 kilometers. At 17 kilometers, the engagement was possible. Mid-course guidance phase shortened, less time for the semi-active radar illuminator to refine the fire control solution. Hit probability estimated at 71% versus 78% at optimal geometry. SM-2 cells 1 through 8 against 8 lead contacts at 15 to 17 kilometers. 8 launches in 3.1 seconds. 6 intercepts, 2 misses, both contacts executing altitude dives below 100 meters in the SM-2 terminal phase, the compressed geometry at 17 kilometers, reducing time available to retract the diving contact. 38 contacts remaining. SM-2 cells 9 through 12. 4 more launches at 13 kilometers. 3 intercepts, 1 miss. 35 contacts remaining. SM-2 inventory 0. Running count 3:30 a.m. second 699. SM-6 0. SM-2 0. ESSM 26 remaining. RAM 21. CIWS aft. 100% engaging. 35 contacts, range 9 to 13 kilometers. Forward CIWS, maintenance reassembly ongoing. Cost $29.4 million. Time elapsed 11 minutes. The maintenance crew at the forward CIWS had been accelerating reassembly since the general alarm. 2 petty officers and a fire controlman working at the fastest technically permissible rate. The barrel assembly required a torque sequence on 12 fasteners, an alignment check, and a 90-second function test with power-up sequence, steps that could not be compressed without risking a misfire under engagement conditions. At 3:29 a.m., the barrel assembly was complete. Alignment check, 42 seconds. Function test initiating. Running count, 3:31 a.m., seconds 734, SM60, SM20, ESSM 26 remaining. RAM 21, CIWS aft active, forward CIWS alignment check in progress. 23 contacts, 4 inside 7 kilometers, 19 at 7 to 13 kilometers. Ship moored. Cost $35.4 million. Time 12 minutes. ESSM cells 7 through 18 fired against 12 contacts at 8 to 11 kilometers in pairs against the 6 highest priority contacts. 12 launches in 5.8 seconds. 8 intercepts, 4 misses. 2 contacts had descended to 40 meters sea skimming altitude, the rapid geometry at 9 kilometers, producing ESSM basket offsets on the fast-moving low-altitude targets. 4 contacts surviving inside 7 kilometers. RAM cells 1 through 8 against 4 contacts at 5.1 to 7.2 kilometers. 6 intercepts, 2 misses. The lead contact at 5.1 kilometers had executed terminal maneuvering at 3 kilometers. A lateral oscillation the RAM seeker tracked, but did not fully compensate for. ESSM cells 19 through 24 against the next 6 contacts from the second formation, now at 6 to 9 kilometers. 4 intercepts, 2 misses, 4 contacts inside 5 kilometers. The aft CIWS was managing the contacts on its optimal bearing arc, while simultaneously the close-range contacts were approaching on bearings, requiring the mount to rotate toward its coverage limit. A geometry problem the adversary had built into the engagement at the planning stage. Running count, 3:32 a.m., second 835, 4 contacts, range 1.8 to 4.2 kilometers. ESSM, 8 remaining. RAM 13, CIWS aft. Engaging, near bearing limit. Forward CIWS. Function test in progress. SM60, SM20. 21 contacts remain in outer approach. Ship moored. Cost $38.6 million. Time 13 minutes. At 3:32 a.m., the forward CIWS function test completed. The fire controlman initiated the status change from maintenance to standby. 44 additional seconds required to complete the power-up sequence. 44 seconds. The closest contact was at 1.8 kilometers, closing at 195 kilometers per hour. That was 33 seconds at current speed. The forward CIWS would not be operational before the first contact reached the hull. The aft CIWS acquired the lead contact at 1,600 meters. The mount had rotated to bearing 074 at the edge of its engagement arc, barrel depressed to near horizontal, tracking a contact at 40 meters altitude, approaching the ship's port-amidship section. At this geometry from the aft mount, the engagement vector fell within the CIWS safety interlock zone that prevented firing through the ship's own deck structure. The fire control computer flagged the interlock advisory. The duty officer cleared the override. Fire. Burst. 1.2 seconds. 90 rounds. The contact fragmented at 1,300 meters. The warhead initiated in the fragmentation cloud. A flat, compressed detonation above the waterline. At 1,300 meters, the overpressure wave reached the hull as a sharp concussive impact felt throughout the ship. The vessel moved against its mooring lines by approximately 0.4 meters. The pier fender system absorbed part of the energy. One crew member in the forward berthing space, nearest to the port-amidship section, was thrown against a berthing frame. Concussion. Treated by the duty corpsman. Not evacuated. Running count, 3:33 a.m., second 854, 1 warhead detonation at 1,300 meters, 1 crew concussion, ESSM 8 remaining, RAM 13, CIWS aft, 87%. Forward CIWS online as of 3:33 a.m. 21 contacts remain at 3 to 14 kilometers. SM6 0. SM2 0. Cost $47.4 million. Time 14 minutes. The forward CIWS came online at 3:33 a.m. Both mounts operational for the first time since the engagement began, 14 minutes after the first warning. 21 contacts remained in the outer approach, now at 7 to 14 kilometers. ESSM cells 25 through 32 against 8 contacts at 8 to 11 kilometers, 4 intercepts, 4 misses. RAM against 7 more at 4 to 7 kilometers, 5 intercepts, 2 misses. Both CIWS mounts against the final 12 contacts inside 3 kilometers, working simultaneously across 2 bearing arcs. The final contact reached 190 meters. Forward CIWS, operational for 4 minutes, acquired the contact at 1,900 meters on bearing 071, a platform that had descended to 25 meters altitude in the terminal phase below every other contact in the engagement. The low altitude had carried it through the ESSM and RAM layers. At 1,900 meters, the forward mount had a direct engagement angle with optimal geometry. Burst. 0.8 seconds, 60 rounds. Contact fragmented at 1,650 meters. The warhead did not initiate. Fragmentation achieved structural failure without triggering the fusing mechanism. Debris scattered into the harbor. One wing section impacted the pier structure 12 meters to port of the mooring point. No pier damage. Running count, 3:42 a.m. Second 1,461. All 50 contacts resolved. 49 neutralized by interceptors. 1 warhead detonation at 1,300 meters. Final contact, fragmented at 1,650 meters, warhead did not initiate. SM6 0. SM2 0. ESSM 0. RAM 13. CIWS forward 92%. CIWS aft 87%. 1 crew member concussion. No structural damage. Cost $52.8 million. Time elapsed 23 minutes, 14 seconds. At 3:42 a.m., the SPY-6 confirmed no further inbound contacts within 20 kilometers. The Base Defense Coordination Net confirmed the launch sites, 3 positions along the Djiboutian coast road east of the city, were no longer active. The damage assessment completed at 5 a.m. Hull, no structural penetration. Port amidships hull plating above the waterline. Shockwave stress, minor deformation. Inspection required, no immediate repair needed. 1 crew member, concussion, treated, resting. All ship systems fully operational, including both CIWS mounts. The forward mount had completed reassembly and was certified operational. The magazine assessment at 5:02 a.m. confirmed the number sequence the watch team had tracked throughout. SM6 0 of 8, SM2 0 of 12 available, ESSM 0 of 32, RAM 13 of 21, CIWS forward 92%, CIWS aft 87%. Every missile cell available in the engagement had been expended. The 12 SM2 cells still in diagnostic lockout remained unavailable. The diagnostic had continued running during the engagement, isolated from the weapon systems, and completed at 6 a.m. as originally scheduled. By the time those 12 cells were available, the ship had no other missile inventory remaining to complement them. 12 fully loaded SM2 cells, sitting in the VLS throughout the engagement, never fired, not because the crew had chosen not to fire them, because maintenance software had priority over a combat emergency. Running count, 5:02 a.m., second 6,844, final magazine status, SM6 0 of 8, SM2 0 of 12 available, 12 diagnostic lockout, never fired. ESSM 0 of 32. RAM 13 of 21. CIWS forward 92%. CIWS aft 87%. Ship moored, fully operational, combat effective on RAM and CIWS only. The supply officer assembled the accounting at 7 a.m. 50 SHAD, 136 one-way attack platforms at $20,000 each. $1 million. Launch logistics and crew, $80,000. Intelligence preparation, the port schedule study, CIWS maintenance rotation analysis, identification of the maintenance window, assessed at several months of observation and analysis. Estimated intelligence cost, $200,000. Total adversary investment, approximately $1.28 million. U.S. munitions expended. 8 SM-6 at $2.1 million to $16.8 million. 12 SM-2 at $1.2 million to $14.4 million. 32 ESSM at $450,000 to $14.4 million. 8 RAM at $900,000 to $7.2 million. CIWS ammunition, $19,000. Total, $52.8 million. Exchange ratio, 41-1 in the adversary's favor. The ratio was within the range of prior engagements in this analysis. The ratio was not the point. The port call schedule was available through commercial maritime tracking services and host nation coordination. The maintenance rotation, which CIWS mount was inspected on which port visit, was inferable to anyone who had observed 2 or 3 previous port calls and noted which mount was covered on each visit. The VLS diagnostic timing was a function of quarterly calendar intervals that a patient observer could infer from behavioral signatures visible from the pier. Power consumption changes. VLS access hatch activity. The specific maintenance crew configurations the diagnostic required. The adversary had built an engagement around the maintenance state of a ship in port. They had not tried to overwhelm the ship at sea with its full defensive capacity. They had waited for a 48-hour window when that capacity was reduced, when the crew was at 40%, when the forward CIWS was open for inspection, when 12 SM-2 cells were software locked. They had been watching for months. The information they needed was on commercial tracking platforms and observable from the waterfront. The after-action report documented 3 systemic factors. First, the port maintenance schedule created predictable capability windows that an adversary with basic observation access could exploit. Second, the VLS diagnostic lockout protocol did not include a provision for immediate combat override. 8 to 12 minutes was the only option, regardless of the threat timeline. Third, the CIWS maintenance rotation created a predictable, alternating pattern of mount availability that was visible from outside the perimeter over multiple port visits. All 3 had been known before this engagement. The ship requested emergency resupply at 6:14 a.m., full VLS reload, RAM replenishment, ETA 4 days. It remained at Pier 4 for an additional 22 hours while the VLS reload was coordinated and crew members returned from the Liberty recall. For 22 hours after expending every available missile cell, the ship sat moored at the same pier with 13 RAM rounds, 2 CIWS mounts, and an empty VLS in the same port, on the same schedule, observable to anyone who had been watching before and was watching still. Emergency resupply ETA 4 days. The adversary had the port call schedule. The next similar vessel on rotation, 11 days. The pattern that made this engagement possible had not changed. The quarterly VLS diagnostic schedule would run again in 3 months. The CIWS maintenance rotation would cycle to the next mount on the next port visit. The Liberty schedule would put 60% of the crew ashore on the next 72-hour maintenance call. The port call dates would be logged by commercial tracking services within hours of arrival. The adversary's observation posts near the waterfront would note which mount was covered. Nothing that had enabled this engagement had been removed. The structural conditions that had created a predictable defensive gap were institutional, not incidental. Changing them would require changes to maintenance doctrine, VLS software, override protocols, liberty scheduling during elevated threat periods, and the commercial visibility of vessel movement data. None of those changes had been initiated. None had been formally proposed before the engagement. The after-action report would propose them. The review process would take months. The next port visit was scheduled in 11 days.